In the village of Nsonoa, where the earth was red and soft like clay, and the baobab trees stood tall like ancient giants, there lived a little girl named Idoma. Her laughter rang like wind chimes in the dry season, and her eyes were always searching for wonder. The people of the village often said she had a spirit too big for her small body and a heart that sang louder than the drums of the festivals. Idoma lived in a round mud hut with a thatched roof, where wildflowers grew along the edge, and butterflies rested by the cooking stones. Her father, Kobina, was a respected hunter, and her mother, Neneye, was a healer, wise in herbs, songs, and the secrets of the ancestors. The village often came to Neneye for healing, advice, and the kind of comfort that only women of wisdom could offer. But this story begins on a night not of healing, but of music and magic. It was the festival of the new moon, a night when the stars blinked like shy spirits and fireflies danced above the grass like sparks from the gods. The villagers lit torches and sang by the riverbank, drumming their hands against carved gem and clapping in rhythm as old stories were told by the griots. Idoma, only 10, was wide-eyed and full of curiosity. She sat on her mother's lap, listening to tales of forest spirits, talking leopards, and drums that could call rain. But something else called to her that night, not the stories, not the drumming, but a strange shimmer in the tall grass behind the gathering. "Ma," she whispered, tugging at Neneye's wrapper. "The fireflies are singing." Her mother blinked and looked where Idoma pointed. There, in the grass, dozens of fireflies floated in a perfect circle, glowing not in flashes, but steadily, as if they were candles. And from the center of the circle came a soft hum, like the sound of a calabash bowl rubbed with a wet hand. "That is no ordinary hum," Neneye said quietly. "That's the spirit wind." She stood, lifting Idoma in her arms, and walked toward the strange light. The music faded behind them, replaced by the whisper of wind and the soft chirping of night creatures. As they neared the circle of fireflies, the humming grew louder. Neneye placed Idoma gently in the center of the light. "Do not move," she said. "Let the fireflies know your name." Idoma stood still, heart thudding like the drum she had left behind. The fireflies circled faster now, faster and faster, until their glow became a ring of light. Then the light bent inwards and vanished. The air turned warm and still. The grass no longer rustled. Even the moonlight seemed to pause. In that moment, Idoma heard something, no, felt something. A song. It did not come from her ears but from deep inside her chest. Words she did not know flowed through her like water. "Child of dust, heart of flame. The road will break, but not your name. Through fire, through tears, through shadow and sky. Your light shall rise when others die." Then, silence. The fireflies burst outward and vanished into the dark. Neneye stepped into the circle and picked up Idoma, who was shaking slightly. "Do not be afraid," her mother whispered. "You have been marked." "Marked for what?" Idoma asked, her voice small. "Destiny." "But remember," Neneye touched her chest gently. "Even when the world is cruel, your heart must stay soft. That is the only way your gift will grow." They returned to the festival, but something in Idoma had changed. She was quiet now, her mind full of the strange song. That night, she slept curled against her mother, dreaming of trees with silver roots and a giant calabash that floated in the sky. Over the following days, Neneye began to teach Idoma things she had never shown before: how to recognize the sound of lies in a person's voice, how to boil tree bark into healing medicine, how to talk to the wind when you're lost. They would sit by the fire at night, and Neneye would say, "Idoma, the world is not kind to girls with bright spirits. But you must never dim yourself. Not for anyone." Idoma would nod, even when she didn't understand. Her mother's voice was like cool water on a hot day, soothing, strong, eternal. But fate does not wait for children to grow up. One day, as the rains returned after a long dry spell, Nenaya began to cough. It started small, a little wheeze after tending to the herb garden. Then it became deeper, harsher, until she was spitting into a rag that turned red. Kobina went to fetch healers from nearby villages, but none could help. They gave her roots to chew, leaves to boil, and charms to wear, but the sickness only grew. Adoma sat by her mother's side every night, holding her hand and humming the tune from the Firefly Night. Sometimes her mother smiled faintly. Other times, her eyes were far away, already reaching beyond the veil of this world. On the 7th night of the sickness, the wind fell silent. Nenaya pulled Adoma close and whispered, "My child. In kindness is power. In suffering is wisdom. In silence lies strength." Tears rolled down Aduma's cheeks. "Don't go." But her mother was already fading. "Hold on to the river of your heart," Nenaya murmured, "for it will take you to a good place." And then, she was gone. The next morning, the women of the village wailed. Kobina sat by the door, face in hands. Adoma stood alone by the fire, holding the rag her mother had coughed into. She felt nothing. Not yet. It was only that night, when the fireflies came again, this time in a crooked, broken circle, that she screamed into the darkness. The world had changed. And Aduma's journey had just begun. The days after Nenaya's passing felt like a never-ending twilight. The village of Nsonoa mourned her death, but grief is a strange thing. It visits deeply for a moment, then moves on. Life continued. Drums were played again. The healer's hut stood empty, its herbs slowly drying and curling in the wind. But inside Aduma's chest, a quiet war raged. Her world had lost color. Even the flowers by their hut stopped blooming. Kobina, her father, had not been the same since the burial. His silence was like a heavy blanket no one could lift. He left home at dawn with his spear and bow and returned long after the sun fell. Sometimes, he didn't come home for days. His clothes smelled of palm wine, and his eyes held a wildness Adoma had never seen before. She was only 10, but already she washed their clothes, fetched water from the stream, and cooked watery porridge every morning. One day, the sky grew heavy and dark, as though the ancestors themselves were mourning. The trees swayed nervously, and birds flew low to the ground. Elders gathered in the village square, whispering that a great storm was coming, not a normal storm, but a mourning storm, the kind that carries away the last bits of a soul. It arrived at night. The wind howled like wolves, tearing through thatched roofs and shaking even the strongest trees. Thunder rolled like the feet of giants, and lightning danced across the sky in blue veins. The rain came down sideways, striking the earth so hard that it bounced like pebbles. Adoma curled in a corner of their hut, clutching her mother's old wrapper. The one with tiny red suns stitched into the edges. Her father wasn't home. Boom! A tree fell nearby, shaking the ground. Sparks flew as it snapped a farmer's oil lamp. The storm raged for hours, but when it finally passed, the silence that followed was worse. The next morning, the village woke to destruction. Several huts were flattened. The river had risen and swallowed the yam fields. Children cried over lost goats. Roofs hung crooked like broken hats. And at the edge of the village, something even more unexpected had arrived. A tall woman in a red shawl. Her skin was smooth and dark like polished wood, and her eyes were sharp, almost too sharp. She carried 2 bags and held the hands of 2 girls, twins, by the look of them. One had a scar under her eye, the other wore golden beads in her hair. When Kobina returned that morning, he was not alone. He brought them with him. "This," he said gruffly, "is Mafoa. She is my new wife." The village fell silent. Some muttered under their breath. Others simply looked away. Mafoa smiled, but it was not a kind smile. Her eyes darted quickly to Adoma, narrowing slightly. "And these are my daughters," she said. "If you are an Eta, they will be staying with us." Adoma felt the earth tilt. The world spun oddly in her mind. A new wife? Already? Her mother's grave still smelled of fresh clay. She wanted to scream, but her throat closed like a drum. She bowed politely, as her mother had taught her. "Welcome." From that day on, the little round hut that once held warmth now carried tension like smoke. Mafoa unpacked quickly, taking over Nana Ya's old sleeping mat and pushing Adoma to a straw mat near the cooking fire. If you were an Eta refused to share anything. They laughed loudly, especially when Adoma was near. Sometimes they mocked her mother's singing voice, twisting the words of the lullaby into cruel rhymes. At first, Kobina tried to keep peace. But his heart had grown hollow, and Mafoa knew how to fill it, with cooked meat, palm wine, and soft, sweet lies. "She's too quiet," Mafoa would whisper when Adoma passed. "Girls like that are dangerous. They grow into witches." Adoma pretended not to hear. But each word sank like a stone in her heart. Soon, the chores grew. Mafoa made Adoma fetch water 3 times a day, more than was needed. She had to sweep, clean, cook, and wash all their clothes by the river. If she rested even for a moment, Ifua or Eta would shout, "Lazy girl," loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Once, Adoma forgot to salt the stew. Mafoa poured the hot broth on the ground and made her lick the stone floor as punishment. The villagers noticed, of course. But who would speak against the hunter's new wife? Besides, Mafoa had a tongue like a snake, quick, clever, and full of stories. "She's a wild girl," she told people. Her mother spoiled her. They believed her. Or pretended to. One night, as the rain drizzled lightly on the rooftops, Adoma sat by the dying fire, her arms tired from scrubbing all day. Efua and Eta lay sleeping, one snoring, the other hugging a carved wooden doll. Kobina was drunk again, murmuring in his sleep. Mafoa sat across from Adoma, sharpening a bone needle. The firelight flickered on her face, making her eyes seem hollow. "You know," she said suddenly, "you'll never be like your mother." Adoma said nothing. She was weak. Too kind. That's why she died. The word struck like a slap. Aduma's breath caught. Mafoa leaned forward, voice cold. "And if you're not careful, child, the same spirits that took her will come for you." That night, Adoma wept silently under her wrapper, but she did not forget. She repeated her mother's last words to herself over and over. "Hold on to the river of your heart. For it will take you to a good place." That same week, a messenger from a neighboring village arrived, announcing a royal decree: a festival of choosing would soon take place. Princes and rich traders would visit, seeking brides from humble villages. The village of Nsonoa was buzzing like a hive of angry bees. Girls ran about with painted feet and faces, laughing and singing as the day of the festival of choosing drew near. Mothers bargained at the market for the best fabrics. Tailors worked from dawn till moonrise, stitching dreams into dresses. Even the old men, who usually sat under the baobab tree chewing bitter kola nuts, began talking about who might be chosen by a prince. But in one corner of the village, a girl sat quietly, her fingers soaked with cassava water, her feet swollen from pounding fufu. Adoma. While her stepsisters tried on bracelets and layered perfume onto their skin, she was sent to the bush to collect firewood. The sun bit at her back, and ants crawled over her toes as she bent again and again to gather twigs. She didn't complain. She had learned that complaining only made Mafoa smile with wicked delight. That evening, After the chores were done and the hut filled with the giggles of Efua and Etta, Mafoa called Edoma aside. "You're not going to the festival," she said flatly. "You'll stay and clean the compound. You're not fit to be seen." Edoma looked down at her fingers, blistered and brown. A quiet sigh slipped from her lips, but her eyes remained calm. "Yes, Ma," she whispered. But deep in her heart, a small ember glowed. That night, when the others had gone to sleep, Edoma crept outside and sat beneath the Nyamdua tree. Her mother had once said that the spirits gathered around that tree during the changing of the seasons. The moon was full and bright, casting silver shadows across the red earth. "I don't want to be a princess," she whispered into the wind. "I just want to be free." Suddenly, a rustle came from the leaves. Not the rustle of wind. It was slow, deliberate. A movement with purpose. Edoma froze. From behind the thick trunk stepped a woman. She was tall, taller than any woman Edoma had ever seen, and draped in black cloth that shimmered like snake scales. Her skin was as dark as night, but her eyes glowed red like coals in a fire pit. Edoma's breath caught in her throat. "Do not be afraid," the woman said. Her voice was like 1,000 whispers woven together. Who are you?" Edoma asked, barely audible. "I am the one who sees what others do not," she replied. "I am Nyakoa, the watcher of hidden fates." Edoma stared, unsure whether to run or bow. Nyakoa stepped forward and touched Edoma's cheek gently. "You carry your mother's scent. Her heart lives in yours." Tears pricked Edoma's eyes. No one had mentioned her mother in weeks. "Why have you come?" she asked. Nyakoa's eyes turned skyward. "The spirits have seen the cruelty in your home. They know the fire that burns in your bones. And they have a gift. If you dare to receive it." Edoma's heart pounded. "What kind of gift?" The woman reached into her shawl and pulled out a small calabash bowl, carved with tiny spirals and sun symbols. It shimmered faintly, as if the moonlight bent to touch it. "Drink this," she said, holding it out. Edoma hesitated. Her mother had taught her never to drink from a stranger. But this didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like something old, something familiar. Like a lullaby she'd forgotten. She took the bowl and sipped. The liquid was warm and thick, tasting of honey and pepper, ginger and ash. It burned down her throat and settled in her belly like fire. Suddenly, visions flooded her mind. She saw herself in a great hall, wearing a dress made of stars. She saw a golden drum with her name etched on it. She saw Efua and Etta weeping, Mafoa screaming, and her father kneeling in shame. She gasped, dropping the bowl. The vision vanished. "What was that?" she whispered. Nyakoa smiled. "Your path." "But how?" "You have been marked by the ancestors. The fireflies sang your name, child. You cannot hide from destiny." Edoma blinked, struggling to hold on to everything she'd seen. "You must go to the festival," Nyakoa said, turning to leave. "No matter what they say. Your fate awaits you there. But listen well, when the golden drum is played, do not look with your eyes. Look with your heart." Then she vanished. One blink, and she was gone. Only the calabash bowl remained, empty and glowing faintly in the moonlight. Edoma sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The fire inside her chest now pulsed brighter, stronger. Her mother's words echoed again. "Hold on to the river of your heart, for it will take you to a good place." She picked up the bowl, hugged it close, and made a decision. The morning of the festival arrived with drums and color. Girls from nearby villages arrived in fine cloth and polished beads. The village square had been decorated with banana leaves, bright feathers, and long banners made of dyed kente. Efua and Etta looked like peacocks. Mafoa fussed over them, smoothing edges and applying oil to their foreheads. Adoma swept the compound silently. But something strange happened. As she cleaned, the wind shifted. It blew gently across her face, and she heard it again, that strange humming, the same from the firefly circle years ago. It was soft, like a hidden drumbeat. She followed the sound behind the compound and found a parcel tucked beneath the roots of the Nyamdua tree. It was wrapped in banana leaves and tied with red string. Inside was a dress. But not just any dress. It was woven from fibers she did not recognize, light as mist, soft as flower petals, shimmering like starlight. It smelled of rain and wild mint. At the bottom lay a note, scratched in red ochre. This will carry your name into history. Aduma's hands trembled as she held the fabric. She ran back inside and dressed quietly. No one noticed. Mafoa was too busy shrieking at Etta to stand straight. When the family left for the festival grounds, Adoma waited a moment, then followed, walking slowly, like a shadow. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew something had shifted. The river in her heart was rising. And she was ready to follow it. The drums echoed through the valley like thunder rolling over distant hills. The festival of choosing had begun. The village square of Nsonoa was unrecognizable, banners of crimson and gold danced in the breeze, while long cloths were strung between trees. The scent of roasted plantain, smoked tilapia, and honey wine filled the air. Villagers from surrounding towns had gathered, dressed in their finest, eager to witness the arrival of the wealthy suitors. Adoma stood at the edge of it all, hidden behind a tall calabash stand. Her gown shimmered softly in the sun, the strange star-like fabric whispering with every movement. She kept her head low. If Mafoa saw her, she would surely drag her home by the ear. On the raised wooden platform sat the visiting suitors, sons of chiefs, noblemen, and rich traders, each seated with attendants behind them. They wore robes trimmed with leopard skin and gold-threaded sashes. But one among them sat in simple white cotton, his eyes watching quietly. Mafoa had placed Efua and Etta front and center. They giggled loudly, tossing their beaded hair and swaying as they walked past the platform. The announcer, a tall man with a carved staff, raised his arms. Let the choosing begin. One by one, the girls came forward, dancing, curtsying, smiling. Some offered gifts, a woven basket, a carved gourd, a small clay drum. The suitors nodded politely, murmured, or pointed to their attendants to take note. Adoma watched from the shadows. Her heart thudded. The dress she wore felt alive, almost warm against her skin. She remembered what Nyakoa had said, when the golden drum is played, do not look with your eyes. Look with your heart. Then it happened. A boy stepped forward with a golden drum. No ordinary instrument, it glowed faintly as if it held the breath of the sun. He began to play a slow, haunting rhythm. It was unlike the other drums, each beat felt like it struck the soul. The crowd fell silent. Aduma's body moved before her mind decided. Drawn by some unseen force, she stepped into the open. Gasps rang out. Some villagers stared, others whispered. Mafoa turned, and her face twisted in fury. You! She shrieked. Get back here. You're not supposed to be. But she was too late. The golden drum's rhythm wrapped around Adoma like a spell. She walked slowly toward the suitors, her dress glowing, her eyes lowered with grace. The man in the simple white robe stood. He stepped down from the platform and approached her, ignoring the shocked murmurs. He looked not at her dress or her face, but into her eyes. Tell me, he asked, who taught you to walk like the river? Aduma's voice trembled but held steady. My mother, she said. She said the river of my heart would lead me somewhere good. The man smiled. He turned to the announcer. I choose her. Mafoa gasped. Efua and Etta screamed. The crowd erupted in awe. She's nothing. Mafoa cried. She's nobody's daughter, just a housemaid. But the man only said, then let her be the daughter of the wind. He took Aduma's hand. The golden drum beat once more, louder than ever. And in that moment, Adoma realized her story was no longer being written by cruelty, but by courage. The choosing was complete. And her fate had just begun. The crowd was still buzzing long after the golden drum stopped. Some clapped. Others whispered. A few simply stared in disbelief. Who was this girl in the shimmering dress? And who was the man in plain white cotton who had chosen her? Adoma clung to the stranger's hand, unsure whether to be frightened or grateful. He led her gently through the crowd, away from Mafoa's glare, past her stepsister's shocked faces, and toward the path that led out of the village. She looked up at him. You're not like the others. He smiled. Neither are you. They walked in silence for a while until the sounds of the festival faded behind them. Who are you? She finally asked. My name is Kojo, he said. I am the son of Kweku the healer from the hill country. Aduma's brows furrowed. But you were sitting among the rich suitors. I was invited, Kojo said simply. They thought I was a servant. I never corrected them. Why choose me? She asked, unsure if she wanted the answer. Kojo stopped walking and looked at her with soft, steady eyes. Because while others danced to be seen, you moved like someone searching for truth. You didn't need to speak, you carried sorrow and strength in your silence. That is the kind of woman I hope to find. Adoma lowered her gaze, unsure of what to say. They reached a small hut tucked beneath tall palm trees. A goat bleated nearby, and a woman sat weaving a basket by the doorway. She looked up and smiled. Kojo, she said. You've brought someone. This is Adoma, he said. She is to be my wife. The woman rose and embraced her warmly. Then welcome, child. You are safe here. That night, under a roof made of straw and stars, Adoma sat by the fire. Kojo roasted yams while his mother hummed an old lullaby. The warmth of the flames and the quiet peace of the home made her heart ache. It had been so long since she felt like she belonged anywhere. Kojo passed her a roasted yam. You don't have to speak of what happened back there, he said. But know this, whatever pain you carry, you don't carry it alone anymore. Tears welled in Aduma's eyes. Not from sadness. From relief. In that moment, she knew, though this man was not rich, though he lived in a humble hut and not a palace, he had given her more than anyone ever had. Kindness. Dignity. Peace. But peace, as the old ones say, never lingers long when jealousy burns nearby. Back in Sonoa, Mafoa paced like a trapped leopard. Her pride had been wounded before the whole village. She tricked him, Mafoa spat. She used some sort of spell. Efua sobbed into her pillows. Why didn't he choose me? I wore gold. I danced like the river goddess. Etta growled. Well, make her regret it. Just wait. And in the shadows, a dark plan began to form.